Alright, we are now live for the second Prot stream that has only taken over 2 months.
Has it really been over 2 months?
Yeah, I think it's been just about 2 months.
To be fair, it hasn't taken 2 months, it just hasn't been anything to talk about.
But we'll give everyone a few minutes here to filter into chat. So how's everyone doing?
Pretty good. Bit tired though.
I could have stood to sleep in a little bit longer.
Yeah, I woke up like 3 hours ago. I kept going back to sleep, and then I checked my phone. It was like 2:30. I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh, I gotta get up now.
Yeah, what can you do though?
There's no reason to be tired, though. We've had this prepped for weeks, right, boys?
Oh, 100%. I definitely did not get up this morning and prep for this stream.
Nope.
Nope.
Who gets up in the morning?
I mean, my typical Saturday, I get up in the afternoon, but today is atypical, I guess.
Oh, we're fancy enough to be an exception.
That's plenty of people. Look at all those people.
Definitely got a nice little bit of people there, it seems.
But do we have POG enabled?
Do we have
We
what
have
enabled?
PogChamp?
POG.
Oh, I don't have anything disabled in the chat, so.
Hey, while we're waiting, everybody do me a favor and at Wallians.
Oh god, no.
It's important.
I meant in the stream, but you know what? In Discord's good too.
Oh.
Just random Discords, you know.
Wally once told me that he wants to get to 10,000 pings. So if everyone could help him out, that would be great.
God.
So how far are you towards 10,000 pings, Wally?
I'm getting pinged everywhere.
He's pretty
See,
close.
you can hear how happy he is with all these pings. Keep them coming.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm up to like 6,400. Let's not break that today, right?
So another 6 months, you're thinking, right?
We could cut that to 4. Easy.
Yeah, we just have to stream more often.
Oh yeah, more are encouraged. You're not limited to just one.
Please don't do that, pal. Please don't.
Anytime you need Sims done, anything, run for you, happy to help.
Yeah, if you need islands done.
I'm getting pinged in a private Discord, and it's not even me. It was just oh, he's doing a stream now. Like the timing. Oh, tank chat. Yeah.
Oh, man, Don Joe just died because he realised you were in the stream.
Yep, he's actually posting there.
All right, we'll probably get started. Yeah.
That was great.
I think Wally's gotten enough
Alright.
pings to keep him going through the stream.
Alright, you guys can go ahead and get started then and tell them what the game plan is for today.
That was 18 pings.
So we've got quite a bit that we're trying to get going. This isn't a Prezi. I'm very sorry, everybody. Everybody else rebelled against using Flash, so we had to just do a normal PowerPoint, and we're going to be putting a lot of focus on logs. So we're going to touch a little bit on just kind of some of the Azerite trait updates and what that means now that we have another ring. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of upcoming guides and projects that we have within kind of the Discord itself. But then our two main focuses are going to be how to kind of prep for raid using other people's logs for fights you haven't done yet, and how to check your own performance using WoW Analyzer because it's fully updated now. 100% working, right?
Right.
There are definitely no bugs.
No bugs at all.
We maybe found 2 or 3. Yeah.
No more than 10. So the first thing that we have kind of upcoming in terms of guides and projects is we are working on a guide. It's going along pretty slowly, but we want to make sure that it's accurate and easy to read for everybody, is how to read your own Warcraft log guides. That's going to be an important kind of aspect for a lot of people that are nervous about putting their logs in the main channel or PMing them to somebody to look over. We're going to have a guide on how to look at your own performance. We're also going to, you can see on the screen right now, be doing a little bit more in depth on Azerite traits and kind of the theory crafting behind them. Wally's going to hopefully release some spreadsheets. You can talk more about that though.
Eventually, probably sometime soon. Yeah. It's a lot of just copy paste and editing a lot of stuff, but it's still a lot of traits to go through. And this is just what I've been doing for the past, I want to say, a month on this specific one.
Yeah, so definitely ping Atwell Alliance and give him your energy.
Mm-hmm.
Again.
The more pings he gets, the faster he goes on that.
Yeah. So that's what I've been working on.
And then kind of going to the next thing, we're going to also be working on that kind of note of things that we're trying to address is some of the Azerite trait guides and things like that are going to be, they're a little wordy, they're a little detailed. This is obviously going to be really focused on people that want the in-depth information and want the numbers and the why behind everything. But we've also had a lot of people kind of give us feedback that sometimes you don't want to read a 30-page Azerite trait guide just to figure out what you need to be aiming for, what you want to be equipping. At the same time, it's really hard for us to give a catch-all that covers every single situation and every single damage intake type or type of content that you're doing. So we are looking at, I am working on kind of more of an infographic style that's a little bit more visual, that has different sections of types of content with the recommended Azerite traits. Obviously, it's not going to have a ton of detail on it, but at the same time, it's something that you can easily glance at and have a good idea.
It's sort of one of those like top 5, top 10, or whatever we decide on. Just as an idea.
Exactly. And then on the next slide, we have a couple more things that we're trying to work on in terms of, in conjunction with, obviously, there's some information on tank notes already about it that Panthea does, but we wanted to kind of create a resource on what abilities can be immuned with BOP, spell warding, divine shield, everything like that. Sometimes it can be a little hard. There's different interactions. Some drop threat, some immune the damage but don't remove the debuff, some completely remove the debuff. So we want to make sure that it's a little bit more of a comprehensive guide that you can kind of look at in each situation, so you don't feel like you have to ask a question about, okay, on this boss, this ability, can I bop, can I bubble, can I spell ward, what should I do? You can kind of look at one list, find the boss that you're talking about, and be able to figure out what talent or what ability is going to be best.
Or you can also look into logs, which we will teach you how to do later.
Exactly. On that kind of note of just trying to revamp everything, we do want some feedback from you guys on formatting information, how you want to see information formatted. anything that you can give in terms of feedback would be great. We're definitely trying to find a way to make the people that want all the details happy, but also make people that don't want the details and don't want the whys and just want an answer. We want to be able to provide something for them as well. Okay, let's talk about Azrite. We have new rings.
Oh boy.
So a big question that we're getting is, now we obviously have 6 options for the outer trait Azurite pieces. What should we be taking? A little bit of our advice has changed, and that's not because the traits themselves have changed, but in Old Year, I'm sure everybody remembers, if you're doing Mythic Plus, you needed an Inspiring Vanguard and a Soaring Shield. If you're doing Raid, you needed an Inspiring Vanguard plus one of 2 traits that gave Regeneration Array so that you could have that for Raid. That really only left one spot open, and that ended up just being a kind of take whatever you can while still prioritizing the other 2 spots. Now we have 6 options. So all of a sudden, traits like Bulwark of Light, which were really strong, they're strong when stacked. If you have multiples, that's when that trait becomes very, very strong. But it was never viable to have multiple Bulwark of Light traits. So now our recommendations are going to be changing, especially as we do some testing on the new raid traits, on the new 8.1 traits. We're going to have new recommendations than what we were saying in the past, because things like Bulwark of Light are now viable because you can have an Inspiring Vanguard, you can have a Soaring Shield, and you can still have 3 Bulwark of Light traits for your Mythic Plus, which is going to be great defensively. There's a few other, obviously, examples. We're still doing some testing on everything. There's still not logs out yet with every single combination, so we still have to see some interactions. So you'll have to be a little patient, but we will have information on that soon. Wally, does that about sum it up?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Just a quick note on Azurite traits. I know it's not really good information right now. It's a matter of, it's coming soon. But we don't necessarily know how everything interacts yet together, because testing was a little bit spotty on PTR. Things have changed. Things are still being hot fixed. So until everything's kind of set in stone, we don't want to give you a full recommendation. And then if you're the type of person that doesn't check Discord regularly and doesn't see that there's been a change, you keep going with that mindset.
Yeah, for example, like Inner Light. Early on in the beta, we recommended that trait, and then it was nerfed 3 or 4 times, and now it's no longer it's not even in the top 5. It's just, it performs very bad, right? It's just an example, right? Like in the beta, it was great. People wanted it, and then they didn't update the information, and it was.
Okay, so on to our first big section. We're going to be doing a section here on kind of using Warcraft logs to prepare for the new raid. I'm sure a lot of you haven't gone, all the way through yet, or you're still kind of trying to figure things out. Especially in Mythic, that becomes more of an issue, is obviously everybody's progressing at different rates. There's a lot of things that are covered in guides, like tanknotes.com. Panthea, plug it.
Good plug. There's a Patreon at the top.
Yep, there's Patreon. But at the same time, they don't cover necessarily how to plan your cooldowns exactly for it, what the exact timings are for things, where you should be specifically moving the boss and things like that. So using Warcraft logs from somebody else is a really good way to do that. On the next slide, we have Sharkafor is the tank for Blood Legion. He was very, very kind to us and let us use his logs to kind of do a little demo here for you on how you would go into logs, how you would check different things on different fights. And he is streaming on Tuesday. During the day, they are day rating, and he will be doing, I think, the majority, if not all, of his progression as a Prot Paladin. So if you want to see specifically how a Prot Paladin is handling it, that's a great stream to watch. Okay, going into our first So we're going to be starting off with Grong. Just to kind of check taunt patterns, cooldown and immunity rotations, things like that. Because he has kind of a unique swap mechanic, this is a really good one to take a peek at. Because you can see how they're handling the combos, how they're handling, who's getting thrown, everything like that. So you can kind of plan for yourself. So the first thing you want to do once you're in the main page of Warcraft logs is you're going to go into the threat tab. And that'll give you a good overview of the kind of taunt pattern. Obviously, you can see here, it looks like for the most part, the warrior tank was the one that took Grong for most of the time, and it looks like Shark was mainly the one getting thrown and taking that big burst of damage. But going deeper into that to see the actual swaps in the combo, you can click the little plus sign next to Grong. You want to make sure you have the right target. You want to make sure it's the boss or the ad that you want to look at. You can click on either of them, and it'll basically pin a little version of this threat chart up at the top for you. So once you have that, you can navigate to different menus and still keep an eye on that. Now we can go over to the Cast tab, which is all the way on the right. And we're going to swap the main target from friendlies to enemies so we can look at Grong's casts. All the way in the top left, yeah. And then swap that over to select Grong instead of all enemies. And then in the upper right-hand side, we're going to swap from tables over to events so that you can see kind of a step-by-step breakdown. You can see here, obviously, there's kind of his cast pattern. And then at the top, there's a little graph. So we'll look at the little graph first. On the casting graph, you can see that there's 2 bestial smashes and there's 2 rending bites. I'm fairly sure the difference between that is one is him actually starting the cast and one is him actually putting it on somebody. So you're going to have to see if there are 2 spell IDs, which one is the one that puts it on somebody. So in this case, we're interested in the first bestial smash, so we want to select that at the top. And we also want to select the second instance of rending bite.
I was not ready for this.
So on the graph there, where all the abilities are listed, you're going to want to click on the first bestial smash. This is good. This is no higher than where you are right now. The on the graph itself, the little lines.
Oh, you'll click on the line.
At the graph, there is a text above you. One is.
Oh, you want it on that? Okay, that would have been.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're gonna want the first bestial smash and then the second rending bite, and deselect the first rending bite. You can make sure that you've selected the right one if you hover over it. It has a target on it. So if you hover over any of those lines and it has a target on it, then you know you picked the right one. So you can see here, obviously the green ones are the smashes and the blue ones are the bites, which are the dot. So you can hover over each one in each combo and kind of see where they did the swaps. For the most part, they kind of followed the standard recommendation, which is don't take more than one of each unless you have a big cooldown or you're prepared for it. You can do that with bot bubbles. I'm sure other tanks have different abilities. But that's how to kind of check out who's taunting when and what they're doing in that regard. You can also deselect both of those and go to the bestial throw instead and see who's the one getting thrown. Obviously, by the threat chart, we can see that Shark's the one that's getting thrown most of the time. But if it's not clear or if it's for a different mechanic, you can apply this same strategy to different fights, different mechanics. You can kind of select which one to see where they're taunting. So now to kind of check damage intake and how to plan cooldowns and things like that, you can X out of the threat table. and just go back to friendlies at the top and deselect Grung and select the Paladin that you want to look at. So in this case, it's Shark. Just at the top where it's all friendlies. This is good. It's a learning. And then we're going to hop over to the damage taken tab. And just select the ability that we want to look at right on top of the graph where it says all abilities. We're going to select, so let's select Bestial Smash for right now and take a peek. So these are kind of one-time big hits. And you can see if you hover over each instance of them, on the right-hand side, it says every single defensive cooldown that they had up. And you can see what the damage did. So in the brackets there, the R, which is 261,000 in the first instance, is the raw hit. So that's what the hit would do before any mitigation. Obviously, he mitigated about 76% of that. And those are the abilities that were up that all contributed to that in one way or another. Now, obviously, you can plan for those abilities. You can kind of see this is a good way to have a benchmark and be able to know, okay, they did this and they survived. How much did they survive by? Obviously, only being hit by 57,000 isn't really, you could probably get hit for maybe 75,000. You can kind of look at your health pool and the comfort of your healers, see where your healers are struggling, and say, okay, maybe I don't need all of that, but maybe just Shield or Righteous, Consecration, and if I have a Resounding Protection up, that's good enough. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what cooldowns were used in each situation. You can also go over, if you swap the ability from Bestial Smash, you can go to Rending Bite and see how that looks for dots and This one's obviously a little bit more complicated because it's one tick every second for 10 seconds. So these are in batches of kind of 10 ticks. But you can see obviously that it's not ticking very hard. You can get an idea of what the damage is going to hit for. And, even there in the middle, he took some with no, not even a consecration. Presumably he was running back. It's obviously fairly safe to do that. You can also see that really no matter what he's doing, because it's a dot, because it's a bleed, you can see which abilities actually interact with it. Even the ones where he had, certain abilities up, like Shield of the Righteous, which doesn't affect those things, it doesn't actually change the amount that the bleed is ticking for. So you can kind of take a look and see which defensives are actually interacting with that tick and which ones aren't.
You can see that very clearly just above the gap where took nothing. He had a consecration, and then consecration should right just twice. And then you can see that the damage he actually took is the same.
Exactly. So the Shield of Righteous had no impact on it. This is a little bit obviously fiddly and you kind of have to look at it, but it will give you a good indication of what people are using to handle mechanics and what is actually needed for that. So we'll swap over to Conclave next. To give you a kind of a different, more visual way to check cooldown and rotations. Conclave specifically, a lot of people have been asking us about this because the bleed that Kimba, I believe, is it Kimba? Is it Kimbu?
Kimball.
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 Puts on you is a little nuts sometimes to deal with if you're not expecting it. So we have kind of a different, more visual way of checking it, especially for something that's lasting a fairly long time as opposed to just a 10-second dot. So you're going to start going over to the buffs page, and you're going to pull up the tank that you want to look at. So in this case, Shark again. And here we're going to scroll down a little bit. We're going to click the plus sign next to the buffs that you're interested in looking at. In this case, we're going to look at Ardent Defender and Guardian, as well as Pain Suppression and Sack. Just because those are kind of the more commonly used ones, you can take a look at really anything that you want or anything that you notice on the log that was used. But in this case, we're going to do those 4. And this is going to do the same. It's going to kind of pin that up at the top so that we have a little visual representation of when they were all used. And then we're going to hop over to the Damage Taken tab. And where it says all abilities, we're going to go down to the ability that we want. In this case, it's called Lacerating Claws. And at the top, right next to Lacerating Claws, if we go over, we're going to swap over to raw damage. And that's going to give us kind of a little bit of a graph. If you go just to the right of that. So that's going to give us a little bit of a graph. Wally loves these graphs, so I'll let you kind of explain what that looks like and what that.
Yeah, okay. So you can see so it has 2 sort of graphs it follows. First, it follows the top one, which is the raw damage you take. Then there's a lower one, which is the damage you actually took. So essentially, the larger the distance between top and the bottom part is how much damage you mitigated. So you can clearly see, like, for example, at 230, he mitigated a lot of damage, whilst at 430, he didn't mitigate a lot at all. It's pretty much how they look.
So it's just a more visual way of looking at that and seeing. This is a good way to kind of see the rotation of cooldowns used, especially our 2 main ones between Ardent Defender and Guardian. You can see, obviously, they're all focused around that 2-minute mark. So obviously, depending on your guild's pull times, that middle section of the fight is really going to be your biggest danger zone. You know it now to save your cooldowns for that time and be prepared for the big damage. There's no usage at all before then, which means the first bit of the fight is likely not going to be that scary in comparison. So that's just a more visual way to see what people are doing. It's a good way as well to kind of look at your own logs if you want to use this kind of raw damage chart to see what the difference was and how much you actually mitigated of a certain ability. It's a good place to see, like, oh, I thought I was mitigating, but I guess I was just getting healed a lot. Or, you know, it was scary, but I still mitigated a big chunk of it. I guess it's just scary.
Also, the part where I mentioned the big mitigation, that was during Kings. So you can clearly see where it matches up and such.
You can see where everything lines up with each other and how he's kind of rotating. So in this case, he's going from Ardent into Sack, into Kings, into Pain Suppression. You can use kind of a similar thing if you want to kind of even write that down for yourself in a note in game, or if you want to throw it on a Post-it on your monitor. That's what I do for cooldown rotations. And just remember that in your mind, or just know that around that period, you're obviously going to be taking a big chunk of damage. Save all your stuff there. And then, anybody have anything to add about Kong?
The fight sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I
Yeah,
have.
there's actually there's one thing. When you do when and if you do the tank swap, there are multiple ways of doing it, but obviously want to make sure that they don't connect at all, right? In an ideal world, you want to make sure that you time it so that the dot doesn't tick when they're buffed up, because that's usually what kills you, and that's usually like why you feel worried about the debuff. So make sure you take a dot, then do a ranged swap so they run through each other, and that usually mitigates a lot of it. Like it mitigates the risk swap, because they don't actually need to be stacked up at all. That's what I have to say about that, boss.
All right. And then the last thing we're going to do is, before kind of Panthea shows you how to put it all together, is we're going to head over to Rastakhan. And this is a tool that a lot of people just don't know about. that I really wanted to display, I guess, is the replay function. So this is a great way to see how people are positioning bosses, especially if you're not sure. So you're going to hop on over to the replay function. For this, we're going to just put it in ×2 speed so that we're not sitting watching a 7-minute fight. But if you pop it in whatever speed you want and hit play and select especially if you want to select the paladin that you're specifically interested in, it'll kind of make them bigger and make sure that you can see them all the time. So you can kind of see their movement, where they're moving the boss to, where they're dragging ads to, and see what the taunt swaps look like. Rastakhan is a great example of this because obviously it has very big taunt swaps, especially going into phase 2, where one tank has Bonsomdi and one tank has Rastakhan, and they have to swap out. I know Panthea mentioned that this is a great place to talk about kind of paladin utility and what you can do on this fight specifically to help with the positioning and to kind of go from that, to kind of optimize, I guess, a little bit who takes what and where you do the taunt swap.
Yeah, so this fight has a very strict kind of rotation in how all of the abilities are done. So Bwamsandi will periodically cast a ability that will make you receive no healing, and this also coincides with the tank swap in phase 2 at a pretty rough time of when you're doing the tank swap. He'll also do that ability. So if, as a paladin, you are the person that starts on Bwamsandi, for that second taunt swap, you will be able to have Spell Ward or Divine Shield up to negate with Spell Ward or remove with Divine Shield that heal immunity, thus removing that complication from that tank swap. That's a nice little thing you pick up from noticing the fight timers.
So yeah, and here you can see like it just is kind of happening again here. You can see kind of their movement, their taunt swaps. You can see them running away from Bonsomdi so that they don't get taken down. So you can see a little bit more of the positioning. If it is a fight that is focused on positioning, I feel like a lot of people don't know this tool exists. So we really wanted to just highlight it, that it's really fantastic, especially for. And yeah, they're all very, very, very busy dodging things, especially in ×2 speed. It's pretty fun to watch. All
yeah,
right.
it's showing the upstairs and the downstairs at the same time, so it's quite rough.
It's a little chaotic, but that's good sometimes. You can pause it, you can kind of slow it down. You can see who's getting targeted. Obviously, you have almost like a little details meter there. So you can see it's just the replay tab. If you look at the top right, there's analyze, which is what you're normally in 90% of the time. It's just all the way to the right, and it's right there. You can customize it. You can see kind of damage done. You can take a peek and see when things are happening. You can compare that to the actual logs and go to that timestamp in the replay and see what was actually happening if something doesn't make sense in logs. It's a good tool.
For example, on Rastakhan, if you notice that your raid members took a lot of damage in a very specific time, you can just go to the replay, see, did you run far? Did you stay still? What happened?
Mm-hmm. So this is great to fix, even if you're in a leadership position, to fix kind of positioning mistakes and things like that. It can be really hard sometimes to notice that on the fly, especially as a tank. You know, I usually just see boss crotch. I don't see where my range. So if you're curious on what they're doing or if they're actually going to where they need to go, it's a good tool. And now we're going to talk about Jaina. Pat's going to walk you through kind of more unique fight mechanics and debuffs and how to look.
You cut out there.
Oh, sorry. Panth is going to walk you through Jaina and more unique fight mechanics and debuffs and how to look at, stuff that isn't necessarily as easy to check out as some of the other things that we've been looking.
Yeah, so with Jaina, the kind of main tank mechanic is the debuff that you get whenever you take any frost damage or damage from the tank debuff. So that will just keep stacking. It will stop at 20, and then when you're at 20 stacks, if you dip below 80% health, you get turned into an ice block. And in phase 1 and 2, you've got different ways of removing this ability. So in phase 1, you've got the fire patches that spawn on the ship. If you move into any of those, it will remove all of the stacks. In phase 2, you've got the barrels, which are immune to damage, but when a raid member hits them with the bombardment, they can then be hit, and then once you hit them, they explode, and they make you lose all your stacks and immune for stacks for a few seconds after that. So the way we'll see how the stack management was done will be, we'll start off with Shark selected, and we'll go into the debuff section of the log. If you can do that for me, Skeletor. So inside here, you can see Chilling Touch. It's constantly being dropped throughout phase 1. In phase 2, there's long periods where it's held, and then it stops being stacked up, presumably from the immunity. And we can also see the gaps in phase 2 between Chilling Touch and also the other debuff of Warmth. So here in phase 1, you can see after a few stacks, it's dropping because there's a high frequency of those fire patches. And then if we go back here on this one, we can see about halfway through the fight, we can see that there's long patches of Chilling Touch, and then it stops. And then if we look further down, there's periods of the Warmth debuff. So that's where the barrel is being used. So you can see the times where they're using the barrel to get rid of their debuffs. Then in the last phase, there's nothing you can do about it, so you just get turned into an ice block. So,
Searing Pitch is also below there, which is the drop in phase 1.
Yeah.
So you can see where that coincides with the gaps.
Yeah, so we can see in using the replay function as we used earlier to see how the actual fight is playing out for sure. Yeah, it gets a bit messed up when you start to pin stuff.
Okay. They're off the map right now, by the way.
Ah, there they are.
I'm going to refresh this page. Nope.
You move around a little bit in this fight, so I think they might just start off the map, and phase 2 and 3 are on the map.
Yeah, you might just want to skip ahead in time.
So throughout phase 1, you'll see periods where the raid all moves to a single spot together. That's where they're all removing their stacks together in phase 1. And you'll do this either when you're high stacks or when Jaina is doing the Ring of Frost. Because after the Ring of Frost, she'll root everyone. But if you're in a fire patch, you get rid of it immediately. And that also has the added benefit of dropping your tank stacks. So that's kind of all there is for a tank in phase 1. And you can see that with people's strict movement and how the raid is coordinated in that way.
I think right now you should imagine this group of people is down in here, actually. But it's just
So yeah, this is
offsetting for some
phase
reason.
2. You'll see the raid is very much clumped together around Jaina, and they'll move from one barrel location to another as they need. You'll see right now the whole raid has the Warmth debuff, so they're not getting any stacks, and then once that drops, you'll see the stacks start rolling in on everything. So then they'll get Jaina down to 30%, and they'll go to the north wall, where they start doing the intermission phase. Which will be in like 2%. I have no idea where they'll go on this map, probably back onto the ship.
Back in the
This is fine.
darkness.
This is fine.
Warcraft
Yeah, so-
Logs is still just catching up to.
So here they're freeing the Thanos and fighting Jaina's Frost Elemental. Once they've killed them both, they'll go to the other side of the map, interrupt Jaina, and then it's the same as the previous phase, but without any of the debuff dropping capability. So you really want your raid to be clumped up in this phase, and as a tank, you will just be swapping with the other tank when you reach max stacks, so that you can, safely always have one tank that's not an ice block.
So you're seeing Shark here is kind of getting high stacks, and
Yep.
he's about to get.
So he'll get
Get the
all the
frozen
stacks,
one.
and then when he goes below 8%, he'll turn into an ice block. There you go. He's now an ice block.
No, he bubbled it, didn't he?
He is a meat popsicle.
Yeah, interestingly, Bubble doesn't seem to do much against it, but you can use a potion from Dranaic Alchemy called the Dranaic Living Action Potion, and that will just get you out of any stun. It's really
Leaks.
So if you have any of those stockpiled from Goon, if you were a orb runner,
Wait, that worked too?
yeah, I got you out of the roots on Goon.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, people are using all the old potions now. So the entire fight is mostly revolved around managing your stacks of Chilling Touch and making sure that you're positioning the boss in a way that you're not making other players get them, as Jaina will do a lot of frontal cone ability. And in phase 3, her frontal cone ability has a 0.25 second cast time, so you can't really react to it. You just have to make sure it's pointed away. But you can evidence how people are using their abilities, how they're using their cooldowns. For this fight, there's not really any strict points where you do use your cooldowns, as it's kind of consistent damage in every phase. So it will mostly be based around how your healer team is reacting to the raid self pull, because if the raid is taking a lot of damage, you're going to suffer as a result of that. So that's when you'll start to utilize your defensive cooldowns, lay on hands, bubble, just to make sure you don't take any more magic damage. Yeah, that's how you'd use the kind of logs for Jaina, just to see how people are doing their tank rotations, what are they using, when are they using their cooldowns, what kind of healing are they receiving. Have we covered how to check a tank's incoming healing? Or
We can go over that now.
yeah, so if we go back into the analyze section, and we go into healing, just under where it says summary, you've got all friendlies. If you pick Shark's name there, this will show all of the healing that he received. So majority is from himself due to the kind of consistent and low nature of the damage in this fight. You'll have a lot of beacon healing from a Paladin, a lot of hots. It just looks to be a lot of kind of passive healing on the tank. However, you can see in other guilds where the tanks just aren't really getting any healing attention, and they often come into Discord to ask, my healers say I'm squishy, and then you look at the log and it's just like, you seem to be doing fine, but your healers aren't keeping up. Then you show them how to do this, and it often results in more healer retention. So it's very simple to get this kind of data.
The graph can also show where it kind of spikes up. You have a little bit of an idea of, okay, that means that obviously a lot of healing is necessary at that point. Maybe those are things that you should take a look and see what mechanics are happening there, or planning for some cooldowns around those breakpoints. Obviously, everyone's kill time is going to be a little different, so you don't need to necessarily write down, oh, because Shark took damage at 4:30, I'm going to take damage there. Try and coordinate that up with where what other abilities were happening at the same time, looking at kind of the debuffs and damage taken tabs, and you can get a better idea of where you're going to need to save your cooldowns, even just by looking at the healing chart.
This is also a good way to determine if you have died. You can just look here and see, like you can zoom in. Say if you were to zoom in on between 6 and 5 minutes. Can you do that for me? Because then you can see during this period, if I had died here, would it have been my fault, or was it like shared fault? Like here you can see that Shark did a lot of healing to himself. He also had a lot of help from the Mistweaver. And then you can sort of determine that, yeah, he was getting help, right? He was getting a lot of healing actually. So then if he had died there, it would have been his fault. And you can just determine that depending on the fight and the acquired. And there's a lot of things as well, like did you miss Shield Righteous on a big tank buster and so on. But if you bleed out, that's a thing you can look at.
And there are other useful ways to use this, like on Fetid, you often combined how much healing was being done with how much damage you were taking to kind of calculate how many healers does a tank need. And on that fight, you roughly wanted to keep it to a point where you were not taking more than at least one healer's attention. So the way we do that is if we reset the zoom and tick off Shark here.
Or I wasn't listening at all. So reset zoom and take off Shark.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here you can see on average the healers are doing between 15 and 20k. And then if we go to damage take,
Damage take.
we can see his damage taken is around 12k. So he's not taking more than one healer's worth of attention, which is good. You'll often see healers struggling to keep up with a tank's incoming damage, and then you'll have a look to see, okay, how much damage is the tank taking? Are they doing everything they should be? Because there are somewhat benchmarks in your mind that you can use of how much damage should I be taking by reviewing other people's logs, seeing what their DTPS is, and then seeing what kind of healing the healers are doing and trying to compare to both. So yeah, the last good scenario that this was used was Fetid. There doesn't seem to be many of those coming in for this tier. Perhaps on the Conclave fight on Mythic, it might be seen, as there is quite large incoming damage on that fight. So being able to mitigate it as well as you can is going to be quite valuable. Yeah, that about sums up, how you can use the log for Jaina specifically, as well as in general use as well, to see, okay, how much damage am I taking? Am I getting healer attention? Can the healers be affording to give me attention? Am I taking too much healer attention?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Can't really determine if death was your fault, but you can determine if you should be getting more healer attention in that period.
Yeah, it's kind of rare to see a tank death that isn't the fault of the tank, as there is quite a large number of tools at your disposal as a tank. But once you've depleted all of those tools and you're still dying, then you start to look into the why and how could this be prevented. Quite often it is a knock-on effect from there being a lot of raid damage, so there is less healer attention that could be spent on you. So it's not always a direct tank healer dynamic. It's more of a raid-wide dynamic.
It's a lot of digging.
Well, I think that about sums up kind of our logs. But now when it comes to analyzing your own logs, we have more tools.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah, they mentioned a lot of digging. We've got something for if you are less of a fan of shovels. Eventually.
Oh, it's up on screen.
Yeah, we'll just go on to WoW Analyzer immediately.
I was hoping for some kind of transition, so you're used to this, but maybe you could
Oh,
use this
right,
instead, kind
sorry.
of deal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right, so here you have a lot of stuff to look at. Now we saw that looking through just cooldown usage and so on was sort of tedious, right? There is a tool that will help you for this. Now, if you take the link and take the ID of it, it's like it says
Just copy the URL in the bar up top.
yeah,
You can
pretty
do
much.
the URL now, the full URL.
Oh, you can do that now?
You can always do that?
Oh,
There was
well,
a brief time at the beginning where you couldn't. You had to actually copy the ID. That was one of the first things that our Holy Paladin friend Zero to rescue fixed.
thank God. All right. So just copy the URL then. And then go to wowanalyzer.com and just post it in there. Now, what do we want to take a look at? There's a lot of checklists, suggestions, statistics, and just information overload almost.
Let's start with the checklist. So the idea of the checklist is that if you don't know where to look, you look here first. This is going to try and highlight what you should be doing and then give you some idea of how well you're doing it. So we're going to start actually at the top with Dr. Farnsworth's core abilities. If you would mind expanding that section for me, Skella. So,
Yeah, there's just a bit of delay.
oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. First thing we see, some of you are going to notice immediately. Shield of the Righteous has a red bar next to it that's almost empty. That's the cast efficiency. That's how much time Shield of the Righteous spends on cooldown. It spent 31% of the fight on cooldown, which means that for 69% of the fight, he actually had 3 charges of Shield of the Righteous available and was not using them.
Yeah.
And
We also see the bad blessed hammer casts. That's also something that needs to be explained.
yeah, so there's a tooltip that explains it a little bit. But the idea is that Blessed Hammer is a filler ability, and Hammer of the Righteous, if you haven't taken the Blessed Hammer talent, is the same way. That you should only be pressing this if you cannot press either Avenger's Shield or Judgment. If you can press either of those, you should instead press those and only press Hammer of the Righteous while they're on cooldown. And he had 22% of his Blessed Hammer casts were done while he had one of those other 2 abilities available instead. Which is a big no-no both for your damage and also Judgment has a big role in your Shield of the Righteous cooldown and uptime.
Yeah. Then we also have like Judgment and Avenge Shield is just how much time they were on cooldown. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, we also have mitigate incoming damage, which is Righteous and Consecration. And that is mostly self-explanatory. You have hits mitigated with Consecration. That's 95%. That means that he mitigated 95% of all the hits he took. It's pretty good. We also have Shield of the Righteous cast efficiency. An efficient Shield of the Righteous is defined as a hit that mitigated at least 2 melee swings or a tank mechanic. So in this case, that would be Bestial Smash, because we run Grong.
It can also be one that prevents you from capping your charges. So if you're at 2.5 charges of Shield of the Righteous, you won't get punished for using a charge before you press your Judgment in case it crits. But we see he had 0% good Shield of the Righteous casts, which means that every single Shield of the Righteous that he cast either failed to block at least 2 melees, or failed to block a tank buster, or was used while he was at less than the cap, which is a big problem because Shield of the Righteous is a really, really, really important ability for your mitigation as a paladin. And this is one of the places where you can start to see a little bit of added value of WoW Analyzer over Warcraft logs, because this kind of aggregate information is hard to pull out of a log on Warcraft logs, just because there is a lot of digging to do to figure it out. The next checklist item is the Hand of the Protector. It's focused on how effectively you use that to recover from taking hits. And we see that Dr. Farnsworth has cast Hand of the Protector almost as much as is possible. He had 85% of the fight with it on cooldown. But then there's a couple of other metrics that he did less well on. The first is the average cast delay, which measures how long from taking a hit you spent waiting before you then cast Hand of the Protector or Light of the Protector. Ideally, you want this to be as small as possible, so that you don't kind of juke your healers by, like, they start casting a 1.5 or 2 second long heal on you, and then at 1.9 seconds you Light of the Protector, heal yourself up, and they just wasted 2 seconds for 0 healing. It also measures overhealing, which in this case he really struggled with, doing 85% overhealing with Hand of the Protector, and we're going to see a little bit later why exactly that is. But for now, let's go down to some of the statistics. So the one that should immediately jump out, there's actually two that should immediately jump out, and they both have zeros on them. There's physical damage mitigated, which focuses on damage mitigated with Shield of the Righteous. In this case, he got hit 46 times without Shield of the Righteous up, but also got hit 0 times with it up. So what this means is Dr. Farnsworth was actually tanking the boss for some period of time, but was not using Shield of the Righteous to actually mitigate the damage from the boss. We also have the soft mitigation checks statistic just to the left of that, which shows how many of the tank busters of each kind, in this case there's only physical tank busters, how many of the different tank busters were mitigated with some ability that you have. This won't check for external abilities because we don't know your raid composition, but it will count things like Blessing of Spell Warding or Blessing of Protection, as well as your cooldowns like Guardian of Ancient Kings and Ardent Defender. So Bully asks a good question. Why would you track overhealing on a percent-based heal? And that is because overhealing is really, really tightly correlated with using it when you're just at really high health. It's not super likely that you're going to overheal when you cast it if you're at 50% health. You have to crit, basically, for that to happen. And actually, that's a good point, because the overhealing there, I'm actually not sure about the statistic itself, but I don't believe it counts crits. I remember explicitly filtering out crits, so you are not punished for getting a crit. So in this case, we see that Dr. Farnsworth here never mitigated a Bestial Smash with Shield of the Right, which is another big issue, which indicates not only that, like, what we're seeing here is that this Paladin is not using Shield of the Righteous to mitigate damage, just almost full stop. They're not using it. Which, this is normal Grung, so clearly you can kill normal Grung without actually using Shield of the Righteous effectively. But if this were something on heroic or you're going into mythic, these are big red flags to watch out for. So scrolling down a little bit farther, we have the timeline, which shows something similar if you've ever used the Warcraft logs timeline, which I don't think got highlighted in Sessa and Panthea's section on log analysis. We've got a timeline here with normally a bunch of cooldown information. However, Dr. Farnsworth on this pull had a Azurite trait that grants a large amount of haste. It's like 500 haste on a proc. What we use for cooldown information for these timelines is based on tracking all of your haste buffs, because so many of these abilities have cooldowns that depend on haste, as well as just like GCD tracking. Because we haven't tracked that new trait yet, it detected that something was wrong because all these abilities were getting cast when they were supposed to be on cooldown. So for this particular fight, we're not going to get to see cooldown information. We're going to look at one more fight, and we will actually get to see cooldown information on that one. However, for this fight, there are a couple of interesting components that we can look at on the timeline and elsewhere in this set of tabs at the bottom. The first one is there's a battle potion of stamina. I'm going to let Wally explain exactly why battle potion of stamina is not something you should use.
There's a couple of reasons. First of all, stamina is only really useful against very, very large hits. And that's like undergeared, fetid progression before nerfs sort of hits. Like, if you cannot survive a hit on full health, stamina potion is... you can start to consider it at that point. Outside of that, it does absolutely nothing. Strength potion makes your shield righteous, mitigate more, gives you slightly higher parry chance, and it also gives you more damage. You will never need a significant amount of health on a pull. And it just...
So what,
yeah, go.
so what you're saying is don't pre-pot stamina. Is that right?
Yes, don't ever do it.
The other interesting ability that you might have noticed here is Hammer of Justice shows up in this list. And Skella is going to have to scroll to the side a bit for me to see when this gets
And blinding light.
cast.
And blinding light.
Oh yeah, and Blinding Light. I don't know how many of you have gotten to do Grong yet on any difficulty, but there's nothing that can be stunned or blinded on Grong. So these abilities, when they are cast, actually just take up a GCD to do nothing. And we can actually, if we switch over to the Events tab, and search for Justice, we can see that every single Hammer of Justice that got cast targeting Grong the Revenant. So because this is an Alliance Paladin, it's Grong the Revenant instead of just Grong. So we see that he cast Hammer of Justice 3 times, all 3 times targeting the boss. Hammer of Justice does not function like Fell Eruption for Demon Hunters that stuns if it can be stunned and otherwise deals extra damage. Hammer of Justice just always deals no damage.
Also the same thing if you search for blinding light. Use it twice and only hit the boss. So he effectively wasted 5 global cooldowns this fight. And that's obviously
So
not
if
good.
if we switch the abilities tab, we get a bunch more information about cooldowns and casts, and specifically how much time each ability spends on cooldown, how many casts, and how many potential casts you can have. And this is all based on, this includes procs, this includes haste, so if you get Bloodlust, well, I mean, hopefully you get Bloodlust. That's obviously going to reduce, for example, your Judgment cooldown, which depends on haste. So that will be counted in the maximum number of casts that you could get. We see in this case that he actually cast 59 of 61 Blessed Hammer, which is quite a bit higher than he did for either Avenger's Shield or Judgment. And this lines up with what we saw at the beginning looking at the checklist, that he was prioritizing, it appears, he was prioritizing Blessed Hammer over Avenger's Shield and over Judgment, which is detrimental to your DPS and also just like not good defensively. There's not a reason to be doing that. But we also see something that's very interesting, and there's a odd interaction with Seraphim that I'd like to point out here. Shield of the Righteous, if you pay attention, has listed 1 of 23 casts, and yet it spent 31% of the fight on cooldown. Why is that? The answer is that time on cooldown also includes spending Shield of the Righteous charges on Seraphim. So he cast Seraphim 3 times, which consumed 6 Shield of the Righteous charges, which meant that he effectively used 8 of 23 available Shield of the Righteous charges over the course of the fight. However, he also only cast Shield of the Righteous once, which is a huge problem. Since he effectively used like 8 charges, that means that he had an extra 15 charges that he could use to mitigate damage from the boss, to mitigate those 5 bestial smashes that simply didn't get used.
That's over a minute of Shield Righteous uptime that he missed out on.
In a 3-minute fight.
It's a lot.
And even despite that, he still missed 2 potential casts of Seraphim. And I believe Williams or Sessa or Panthea can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's still correct for DPS to delay Shield of the Righteous every other time so that you can line it up with wings. Is that right?
No, you delay wings for the next Seraphim cast.
Oh, it's the other way around. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he had fewer Seraphim casts than were possible here. So even though he was obviously not using Shield of the Righteous as effectively as he could have, he also wasn't making up for it by just casting Seraphim more. He still missed those Seraphim casts. Last thing I want to look at on this Grong kill is the self-heal timing tab. This tab shows when you cast Hand of the Protector, how much health you had. It'll also show if you died, so you can kind of see if you got spiked down and didn't have Hand of the Protector available because you cast it shortly before you died. But in this case, we also see why he has 85% overhealing. And it is not because he gets lucky with crits and overheals. It's because he casts it when he's at full health, or very close to it. His first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are more than 90% health.
We have a theory why this is, though, and we're gonna reveal that after.
Yeah, we have some ideas on what's going on here. So we'll get to that after we go through. We got one more fight we want to go through to kind of go over all this stuff one more time and just kind of solidify our understanding of how he's playing. That's not the haste buff that he's getting. That one is supported. He's getting a different haste buff. I think it's Sister of a... Actually, Skelly, can you scroll up to the top? And there's a tab called Character that shows what Azerite traits you have, all the way to the top. So Azerite powers, that one on the end gives 468 haste, 1 over. That one, 465 haste for 15 seconds, Shadow of a Loon. We have not implemented that buff yet. It either was released with Darkshore or was released, I guess it was released with Darkshore in 8.1. It just hasn't been implemented yet. So that's why the cooldown information is somewhat wonky. We just don't have all of the buffs implemented, because there are a lot of random stat buffs due to Azurite traits in this. So next, we're going to look at this same tank, Dr. Farnsworth, on his normal Jade Fire.
Man, you really like his name, huh?
I love Futurama. I'm so happy that that's his name, but at the same time, a little bit disappointed.
Wow. Toxic. Alright, so when we look at the first checklist, we can see that it's mostly the same. So we go and look at Theria, and we can see that Shield Righteous is actually 100% efficiency. His Avenger Shield, much worse. Judgment, worse. And Blessed Hammer, also much worse. Now, why is Shield Righteous 100% efficiency when he was clearly not using it last? What could be the reason for that?
So if we look at his incoming damage mitigation with Shield of the Righteous, we see again cast efficiency 100%, but 0% good Shield of the Righteous casts, which is odd. It's very strange. And if we look at his Hand of the Protector casts, again, we see he had less cast efficiency this time. That's going to be, we're going to actually, if you go to suggestions real quick, Skella, uh, he died and spent a significant portion of the fight dead. Down at the bottom of the suggestions region, he spent 38.5% of the fight dead. So he was dead for quite a bit of time. So his uptimes and his cast efficiencies are generally going to be pretty screwy. But it also means it's actually impossible for him to have 100% cast efficiency on Shield of the Righteous.
Also, 100%. No, sorry, 0% death timing is recommended.
Yes, it is recommended that you spend 0% of a fight dead.
I just think it's so funny.
So if we scroll down a little bit, we're gonna get a clearer idea of what actually is going on here. But I'm gonna spoil it a little bit. This is a bug. Uh, if we look, he again mitigated 0% of the physical damage with Shield of the Righteous. He simply he had high downtime, which is because he's dead. If you look at your downtime and you spend 40% of the fight dead, you're going to have 40% downtime. He had 45% downtime, which means that for that time that he was alive, he actually had decent downtime. But if we go all the way down to his abilities, we're going to see some interesting things. So first off, briefly, we have the timeline, which actually has cooldown information this time. We can see, for example, that he cast Avenger's Shield, and it came off cooldown about 17 seconds into the fight, and then was not cast again in favor of casting Blessed Hammer, which just kind of illustrates what's going on. He's casting Blessed Hammer instead of casting Judgment or Avenger's Shield, even though those are available for him to cast. We also see, again, Hammer of Justice and a Battle Potion of Stamina pre-pot. Both of these are still issues. If we go to the abilities tab for real this time, Skella, I swear I won't bait you again. We see that he cast Hammer of the Righteous 4 or 6 possible times. And in theory, you could use it to stun Zuin when it gets summoned by the monk, but that's not actually how it was used. I'm not going to make him go to the events tab and look it up. All 4 casts are targeted at the monk boss, and all 4 of them did 0 damage and did not stun the boss. However, we also see Shield of the Righteous 0 casts of 0 possible casts. This is a bug. I haven't gotten the chance to look at it yet in detail because I saw these logs for the first time a couple days ago. But this is likely just a bug that is introduced by literally not casting Shield of the Righteous ever and breaking some assumption that I had somewhere in the analysis code that assumes you will cast Shield of the Righteous at some point, and he just didn't do it.
You are aware now you're going to get a bunch of logs where people purposely don't press that spell and just link them.
So this is a big problem that I had. I'm the one also, some people may remember, that wrote the Fetid log, which caused a bit of a stir. I also spent approximately 3 weeks with people DMing me their logs where they intentionally did not use Ironskin Brew on various fights in Uldir. Mythic, normal, heroic, didn't matter. I had somebody link me a Mythic Plus log where they didn't use Ironskin Brew.
Oh, I'm sure that group loved it.
Oh, I'm sure they did. But I spent a lot of time fixing that so that now, if you look up a brewmaster on the analyzer, it will 100% tell you that you screwed up for not using Ironskin Brew.
It would just ban you from the site.
So this is something that you need to be aware of if you're looking at WoW Analyzer and you see a result that looks odd or that seems contradictory to what other things you're seeing on the analyzer or on Warcraft logs. There is 100% the possibility that there is a bug. And you can at Williams to let us know.
Oh god.
In reality, you should actually just at me in Hammer of Wrath, and I will look into it. Last thing we're gonna look at though is his self-heal timing one more time. So
Well,
we
that's
see the
empty.
region. We see the region where he died. It's a big empty space from the red line to where he gets res at the last quarter of the fight. But we also see that he used Hand of the Protector, like 4 seconds before he actually died, while he was at 98% health. I think he promptly got smacked and died without Hand of the Protector to help recover from that. He also, for what it's worth, wasn't using Shield of the Righteous to mitigate the melees he was taking at that time. But he still did misuse Hand of the Protector there.
Well, that's not the reason he died, though. We can go into death recap and look a bit further.
Sure, let's do that.
Now, this is a lot of text, and how do you do this? Like, how can you just read through 10 seconds of just spam healing on him?
Yeah, this is one of the
filter
issues.
Yeah, you can filter the events based on the amount of percent, like the amount of things it did. So let's put it to say 10%. And now we can clearly see what happened. Took a fireball. That's normal. Then he stood in the beams that spawned from the boss, like those bombs that attack with you with beams. So he didn't avoid the beam, and he died.
He took 150k damage almost from the
Yeah.
beams. He has somehow about 300,000 health, which is a lot,
God knows
but
why.
I don't understand how he has 300,000 health. Maybe he's a panda that's using the stamina food. I don't know.
It's the stamina pre-pot.
Panda
He
Paladin.
he has like 330k during the pre-pot though, and then it drops to this like 297k though. It's not actually like 300k the whole time because obviously he used the stamina pot.
It's actually legit 300k. So while his hand protected usage was very questionable, it's not why he died. So there's other things to work on as well.
Yeah, this is a situational awareness issue. Ye olde adage of don't stand in the fire. Sometimes the fire is not directly underneath you, but a line that will cut through you. And this is one of those times that like he died. He could have done things better as a tank, as far as mitigation, as far as self healing. But at the end of the day, he stood in the fire, and that's really what killed him.
Yep. So I think that was the main things we want to bring about, like to talk about him, right?
No, I think there is one thing that's not on the list here. I think you want to talk about the enchants and gems.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yes. Let's go back to his character then and take a look what he's using.
I actually haven't looked at that. I don't know what we're in for.
Well, let's see what he's. Oh, you can do that, yeah. So he's enchanting and gemming mastery. Now, in most cases, I would say that that's a bad idea because haste is so much better when it comes to Shield Righteous uptime. But if you're literally not casting Shield Righteous, yeah. So while I think that gemming and chanting mastery is bad, it's probably the best for him. However, once he improves his gameplay, haste will be better.
Though to be fair, in this fight, he had very low consecration mitigation. He only mitigated like half of his damage taken, or half of attacks with consecration. So even though mastery is at a higher rate than versatility as far as just flat damage reduction, because consecration wasn't being used well here, it would probably be better for him to just gem versatility and enchant for versatility instead.
Yep. But just we think that there's a misunderstanding with how the class is being played, and that's the reason why. Like that's why we think that Hand Protector usage is so strange, and why Shield Righteous might be weird, right? We looked at his previous logs in Uldir, and he had about the same issues. He did use Shield Righteous more, but it wasn't while he was tanking. It was just he used it as a DPS button on cooldown whenever it was ready, right? So he killed Talok and he killed Mother on his Paladin, and it took maybe 5 hits in total of those 2 fights, right? So it's clearly an ult, and it's someone who's playing that ult just for quick rekills. Then we kept going, and we found that he's playing a what was it again? A Death Knight, Blood Death Knight, as a tank, and he was playing it properly, or he was playing it to standards
If you
you'd
look,
expect.
if you looked at this log and then looked at his blood decay logs, you would question whether they were from the same person. And that's not to
Yes, for
say
sure.
that his blood decay logs are perfect, because there's not, most people's aren't. But I would look at those and say, yeah, that person's probably fine in heroic. Unlike looking at these paladin logs, this person has some issues to fix on their paladin before they really are ready for heroic.
Yeah. So what we think is that this person believes that Marrowrend is similar to Blessed Hammer. And we also believe that he thinks that Hand Protector is similar to Deathstrike. While the Deathstrike and Hand Protector similarities is true, we think that the priority, or rather the where the mitigation comes from, is a bit. He has a bit of a misunderstanding there.
Like he's tried to map what he knows about blood decays, about maintaining Marrowrend and using Deathstrike to heal himself, and assuming that Deathstrike's going to be fairly available. It's going to be not. You can't use it every GCD, but you can use it much more often than you can use Hand of the Protector or Light of the Protector. And so trying to take that playstyle and just like do it, but with glowy wings.
Yeah. So he's trying. So our understanding of it is that he's trying to just keep Blessed Hammer debuff up at all costs, and then just healing through the damage. So while that works on Heroic, it's not going to work once you scale up the difficulty. What you need to do as a Protection Paladin is use shield righteous to mitigate incoming damage, and then heal through it with Hand of Protector after you've taken the damage with the mitigation. You also want to cast Judgment as often as possible to make sure that shield righteouses will be available when you need them. If you come into questions channel or PM me or Sessa or Panth, we will gladly help you out a bit more than this. And that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, one more thing I'd like to say. If you have bug reports for the analyzer, obviously we already said, mention me in Hammer of Wrath. If you have questions or suggestions, if you want to see something added to it, you can also talk to me. And I will add that to the list I've got going of features to eventually get added to the Prot Paladin analyzer.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for letting me come.
Well, we're back to WoW Anal now,
That was not in.
huh? Yeah.
I think that about sums it up. So unless we have any like other questions or anything like that from anybody in chat, I think that's what we kind of wanted to show you. I know it was kind of a math heavy, log heavy stream, but we thought that was what was needed in terms of preparing for the next raid coming up and helping people, just giving you the tools to plan the fights for yourself and analyze your own performance. Also tanknotes.com.
Of course. I miss TK.
Well, TK still works.
Mm-hmm.
Tanknotes.tk is the one true domain.
It's all been updated for this tier, and needs to do some mandatory shout outs for Tom and Rehawk. Good Catalyst boys.
I'm not a Catalyst boy anymore.
Unluck.
Unluck.
Look at all those protection paladin notes.
Yeah,
He's
it's
got a
almost as
lot
though
to
it's
say
a
about Prot
slight
Paladins.
bias. Yeah.
It's almost like we have a lot of tools that can be used.
Mm.
It's almost like we have to specify what exactly each of our 3 immunities can do on every fight.
Bully, yes, you should 100% at Panthea on Discord if you find an error on tanknotes.tk.
And if you don't find any errors,
You can probably ping him anyway. Selling out.
Would you look at this? There's a Patreon page for it with some goals listed on future projects that I have coming up. Let's have a look at these goals.
You want to walk us through the goals, Panthea?
Come on.
You just scroll down, you can see them all there.
Wow. There's so many.
Wow.
Amazing.
Oh, is this the part where we plug Patreons?
is one of your goals to have a post that isn't from over a year ago?
Ow.
Yikes.
I'll update it right now.
Just the high, right?
Then we've also got the WoW Analyzer Patreon to help development on that as well.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
want to
mention.
sell that one out?
Yep, there is a Patreon for WoW Analyzer as well. We don't have goals, but
We don't have any goals.
all of the money that is raised through Patreon, whatever doesn't get used for, making sure the server doesn't melt under load, gets used to place bounties on different features to get added to the analyzer. So some of these are big features. There was a large bounty that was placed on supporting arms warriors, for example. And which features get bounties on them is determined based on Let me see if I can find the link. There is a feature request page for the analyzer.
Ooh. Show a degraded experience toaster. I like that one.
This one. So the more upvotes a feature gets, the more likely it is, and the larger bounty it will eventually get. So those of you that have been bugging me about supporting Protection Warriors, go upvote that.
Does anybody support Protection Warriors?
I stand by Protection Warriors.
Ah.
I'll support them to
Just
be
in
whoever they
general.
want.
Well, it does work in SimCraft now, so.
Well, mostly.
Nobody's working on the analyzer for it right now. It was supported at one point during Legion, and then got dropped, and I don't think anybody's picked it back up, so it's not supported yet.
Support Protection Paladin is still there. Protection Paladin is currently not supported.
Yeah, that one I need. To be
Hmm.
fair, it's been like 2 weeks since Prot Pally has been officially supported, so I need to just go and message Zero to take that off the list.
Oh, you can't do that yourself?
I don't think I can. I might be able to. I'm gonna have to find out.
Developer. But yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you for watching then.
Yeah, good chat.
Why are you all so quiet?
Push to talk wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm answering questions in Discord. Somebody still has to do this.
And
What
I'm
if
Rhett,
you
so I'm
answered
just kind of
Discourse
here.
on stream? Skeletor, I don't know if you know this, but the giant shield is, or giant sword is basically a shield, but turned the wrong direction. You just like block, and you're basically a Prot Paladin.
Oh, yeah? I'll have to try that.
That's one hell of a
Basically how
Buster
it
Sword.
works. Yeah. You could just add a TLDR at the top of the guide.
Turn your shield.
All right, I guess we'll end it here for now. I'll update the schedule because it's not updated. I don't know if Protection Boys have any future ideas for streams because this one took a long time to get organized.
See you guys in March. Bye.
Okay,
TVA.
March, I guess.
Couple more months.
All right, thank you all for joining. I'll have the VOD posted on YouTube later. That's also in the links down below, and have a good day.
Yep. See you next
Bye-bye.
road.